What's up? This is Brandon London, and you're listening to the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast. You hear that? The Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast. Let's go, Giants.
Welcome back, Giants fans, to the latest edition of the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast. This week, we are 66% Irish, 33% British, but still 100% Giants. That's right. For the first time ever, we are more Irish than we are British. But who better to have on the pod than Irish NFL shows co-host and Giants fan, Brian O'Leary. Brian, thanks for joining us once again to chat Giants. How are you doing?
I'm in good form, guys. It's a pleasure to be back with you too. And obviously the lads aren't here this evening. I was trying to reflect today on the last couple of times I've been on. It's been under different circumstances. So it's great to be back on with you guys. It's great to be talking Giants. And it's great to be talking about a successful season. And right now it's been a reasonably good off-season as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, We've thoroughly enjoyed the last few weeks, so it will be interesting to get your kind of views on everything. And we've got a few questions to come a bit later. So, but obviously we still have our resident Irish flavour as well with Kev. How are you doing? You good?
Yeah, very good now. Obviously, I had to bring out the Giants sort of Irish gear for this episode, as it's from the Irish the flag on the go as well. You know what I'm saying? But
brought a bit of Guinness for you.
Yeah, it all counts. It all counts. But yeah, just really looking forward to a bit of a review in the season. Touch on some of the news headlines that's coming out, and the draft is so close now. And the thing with the draft is it's an opportunity to make your team better, and we just can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we sort of kick off, get into the meat and gravy of all of this, if you're watching it on YouTube or Facebook, just pop any questions into the comments. We see them. We'll pop them up on screen. We'll answer any sort of questions you got. Subscribe if you haven't. Give it a thumbs up. Let's kick ourselves off. So we'll start with some news. Giants sign offensive lineman JC Hasenauer from the Steelers. 6'2", 295-pounder out of Alabama, undrafted prospect back in 2018, originally signed with the Falcons, 2019 signed with Pittsburgh, went on to make 7 starts in 45 games, 5 of those at centre, which is probably where we're going to be signing him for, and 2 at left guard. I think it's safe to say the signing is probably an insurance policy with the Giants, making sure there's depth at the position that potentially could be addressed into the draft. But, any chance he starts the season, or do you think this is purely, as exactly as we've said, an insurance policy?
I'll jump in first. It feels like an insurance policy, but the way things went last year, I wouldn't argue the case that he could be a starting centre come the start of the season. I think Bredesen right now is the only one on the line that can play centre, and like Feliciano to me is kind of very similar sign last year. Brought in, has the experience of Dable, having been in Buffalo. You've got the situation where I'm glad you pronounced his name Craig as opposed to asking me at the start. but he has experience from Alabama days, having worked with Dable there when Dable was the offensive coordinator. So it makes sense. When I saw him coming in, for that day, I said, okay, that looks like the kind of player, even his physique and what he brings to the line as his experience ultimately is something I think the guys will be keen on in terms of Shane and Dable. Will he start? I would imagine he's there as an insurance policy, because right now I would say realistically left tackle, right tackle, right guard are all locked in, but the other 3 for me are open. And I know there's a question in there around what's disappointed all of us this off-season. Maybe offensive line is one that is there, and we'll probably get into shortly, but I thought Feliciano had done a good season, and despite his age, I thought it would have been someone we would have looked to have held on. He didn't seem to get a massive contract from the Niners, so for him to move on was a bit disappointing. So it does look, to me, as a trace of that type of signing. Will he start? We might be in a position come August where the draft doesn't play out in the manner we want, and we don't get a proper centre start, or we do get one and we just don't feel we're in a position to start that guy immediately, and he could fall into a position, or he falls into the left side of things as well So he's got an opportunity. Like, in fairness, our coaching staff will, we saw it last year. There's not household names coming in. They'll get their opportunity and come training camp, come pre-season games to set the marker for them from their own perspective. And who knows, he could be a serviceable player on the offensive line that we don't expect. We're expecting upgrades throughout the course of the year because of what happened last year. But again, we have to recognise we're still not in a powerful position financially to go out and put in marquee offensive line guys in free agency. Maybe the draft is where we'll pursue one. But insurance plan, yes. Will it surprise me if he's a day one starter? No.
Yeah, I completely agree with Brian there. I think he's brought in as an insurance policy. I think he's brought in to be the backup centre. I think we haven't seen the contract details yet, but I'm guessing it's going to be one of those veteran minimum deals. He's 27, 28 years of age, been in the league a couple of years. Like, Brian Dable does know him from his Alabama days. He was a backup lineman at Alabama with a few starts there as well. Just, video came out today of Ben Bredesen snapping to Daniel Jones out in Arizona with the other players. I can see Ben Bredesen having, position flexibility. He's played guard. He's played a few snaps at center, but he is still only 25, and he's in his last year of his rookie deal. So it very much is like a prove-it year for him as well. So I think this is a good opportunity for Ben Bredesen to take this move by the horns and really start trying to cement that starting center spot. Because if he can come in and play well at center, and you got Hassanar as the backup, then the long-term center in the draft isn't necessarily a priority. I mean, you can look to upgrade the position, of course, but it'd be good to see in training camp and stuff, and when the team comes together again next week to report on the 17th of Monday, to see how they feel about Bredesen taking those snaps. So I do feel like Bredesen sort of has got the start on him now. I do feel like it very much is because very much a backup sort of like insurance policy at that position.
Craig, I just want to make another quick point. Like, Shane Lemieux is there, and he's a left guard, but he's been he again on his day he's a very good left guard, but he's had so many injury problems, and he's still at a young age. There's no reason why he can't cement that position. But again, is that another scenario there? Okay, maybe he isn't centre. Maybe he ends up playing left guard because Shane Lemieux is given an opportunity to win the job in training camp. Again, he finds how many training camps has he walked away from where he's had injuries, and then 6 weeks later he essentially is put on injury reserve for the season, or he comes back. No, I know he came back last season, but he's just you can't rely on him. So it does make sense that you're bringing in a dual player in terms of he can play two positions along the line.
And also, Craig, just quickly, I really do believe that this coaching staff and front office believe in Izudu. I believe that they drafted him in the third round with him wanting to feature as a starting left guard going forward. Now, he was very unlucky with injury again last season, as a lot of Giants players were. It seems to happen every single year to us. But I do think he will be given a fair crack and first crack at that left guard position, opening the way for Bredesen to be the centre going forward.
Yeah, I think we've kind of waxed lyrical, really, haven't we, about how we like Izudu and we think that he's likely to jump into that position. So the fact that we're going to potentially move Bredesen across, obviously depending on what the draft brings and whether we bring anyone in at left guard, very unlikely, centre, probable. We're not sure on where on the sort of whether that'll be a day 1, day 2, or day 3 pick, but it is looking likely. So yeah, a bit more depth, and you have a 90-man roster for a reason, and then it goes down, doesn't it? So right, so big news really from today. First reported by Kim Jones Sports that apparently Saquon Barkley will not be signing his franchise tag and subsequently won't be eligible to participate in the off-season programs for the Giants, which begin this coming Monday. Barkley, who apparently turned down a reported $12.5 million per year offer during the bye week of last season, has now gone through free agency, seeing the running back market pretty much, the pricing diminish, with multiple players struggling to get the deals that they're now were looking for. So with this news coming out today, do you see this as something that will rumble over the draft weekend? And how do you guys see this playing out long term?
It's a precarious one because, I don't know. I'm sure you saw Joe Shane's interview at the league meetings recently, and essentially said that we've pulled away from talks with Barkley, and that's no reflection on Saquon. It's just more he's seen throughout the course of free agency that there's other running backs out there. Williams, who left the Lions, went to the Saints. You have Miles Sanders going from the Eagles to the Panthers. There's a few other ones that escaped me. There was Dante Foreman. I know he's not a marquee running back. Like, there's various different players. He's gone from the Panthers to the Bears. There's a few other ones in there, and none of them have been paid astronomical money. And they've all had, like, Williams had 17 touchdowns last year. Like, he's gone to the Saints. It makes sense for him to go there. It's a good move for the Saints. But, like, you know, he could argue he could have been looking for the type of money that Saquon was looking for. I think the Giants have recognised, as good as Saquon has been, and I think the league and I think the mindset of the league is changing around running backs, and it's probably an unfair reflection of running backs. But the reality is, teams don't value them in the same way. Certainly don't value them the way we valued Saquon when he was picked at number 2. I know Bijan Robinson has been talked about again as the next Adrian Peterson in this draft. Where is he going to go? 15 up, 15 beyond? He's not going to go in the top 15. And I think Saquon has unfortunately fell into a bad timing situation where he's probably now reflecting on that bye week offer and wishing he had taken it. And look, he's not going to sign it. And he's not going to sign it because if he signs it now, I think the Giants will just walk away and say, right, the deal is done. We move on and we focus on next season. Where if he doesn't sign it, it still leaves the door open for potentially an opportunity to negotiate at some stage. I know the Giants are saying they're not negotiating now. It doesn't mean they won't kind of return to the table in the summer. If he signs it now, that's off the table. So where does it like next week? Let's be fair. Like nothing really is going to take. You know, is going to be done next week. It's more of a meet and greet type scenario. Like get back in to make sure everybody's kind of toeing the line in terms of what they're doing in the off season. Maybe the May one ramps up a bit, and the June one obviously is voluntary, but you expect everybody to be there. That for me is really when it would start to impact. I know it's voluntary in June, but you would expect Saquon to be there because at that stage, not only have you got the new free agents, you've also got to draft all players all coming in, and then obviously you got the mandatory camp come July. It'd be interesting to see. I think July 17th, I think, is the cutoff. Thereabouts in terms of the date. I think it's normally the 15th, but that's landing on a weekend. Look, Saquon seems like the kind of player and the kind of guy that will inevitably sign it, won't be happy about it, and he'll make his feelings known. But is it going to diminish from him giving 100% of the team come the new season? No. But I think most Giants fans would like to see him paid and reflective of the work he did last year because he was brilliant last year. Let's be fair, he was fantastic for the team. And he was great in games where Daniel wasn't having the best of the game, wide receivers weren't stepping up, and he stepped up to the mark. So it's a shame that hasn't worked out for him, but I'd say he's kind of wishing now he had taken that opportunity during the bye week to sign that contract.
Yeah, it's such a strange one because like he was offered that 12.5 million per year in the bye week, and I believe the Giants would have gone to about 13 to get the deal done, but Barclays representatives were asking for like 16, 15 million. That's as low as they would go, and they just couldn't meet. And the market has diminished so much, as Brian just said. But it's one of those situations where part of me is kind of like, okay, he plays on the tag now for 10.1 million this year. And if he plays on the tag next year, he'll be playing on the tag for just under 12 million next year. So that's 2 years for 24 million, for 23 million. So that's kind of where the offer has to start going forward. But part of me is like, do you just play him on those two tags? I know it's not really fair on what he's done for the franchise, but it definitely gives the organization sort of the leverage. And I think with Saquon sort of like not going to this, next sort of get together next Monday, which Brian said again, it is absolutely just for the new players to touch base, get the right itinerary for the rest of the offseason, and sort of, check out the facilities, what sort of eating plans they're on, what type of workouts they're doing. It's just that type of stuff. But this is sort of like the only thing he's got to show his displeasure at the tag. He can just sort of go, I'm not turning up for this. He's not happy with the tag. But I do believe that it's nothing to worry about just yet. And again, going back to what Brian says about June's the date. When they come to the voluntary workouts, that sort of date around June is sort of, we'll know more then of whether this is a big deal or not. And one thing that stood out for me was the fact that he, again, was out in Arizona with Daniel Jones and the other receivers doing the workouts, and he hasn't signed. So that 10.1 million isn't guaranteed because he's not signed it yet. But he's still out in Arizona doing the workouts with those guys now. But he's just letting the organization know, this is, I'm stepping away from this for now because, you know, I haven't got a long-term deal sorted. So to me, it's a bit of a nothing, but it is a talking point.
Craig,
Yeah, and I
and
guess.
also,
Go on.
sorry, Craig,
Go on,
just one
Brian.
more point. Just on the Arizona thing, like the gas thing is, because it's obviously not scripted and essentially it's, you know, hooking up with your mates and doing a bit of ball together. They're probably getting more production out there than they are going to be next week when they get together, because next week is all scripted. And you know the way the league is, you know, there's only a certain amount of things you're allowed to do because of the CBA and what's been agreed with the league, you know, in terms of the league and the Players Association and the teams themselves. So you'd wonder how much work will be done next week. Like last week, as great as it is to see all the Giants players getting together and you see Waller arriving, and it seems like there's a great bond now. You know, there Paris Campbell went out to it. You'd also be going bananas if someone got injured out there last week, and you'd be saying,
Oh yeah.
what were they doing? One final point in Saquon. A part of me feels like I was surprised he didn't take that offer, because he came back from a serious injury. He's had 2 serious injuries. He was halfway through a very good season. I mean, the season could have easily gone a different direction. Thankfully it didn't for us, but like he easily could have got injured in those games, and then he'd have nothing on the table because Giants men have, or they didn't get the contract done with you know, they didn't get the contract done with Daniel Jones. Daniel gets tagged, and Saquon hits the free agency market and still doesn't get an offer to the extent of what he had on the table from the Giants, and he would have had to accept something. Otherwise, he would have had to come back looking for the Giants to give him a deal, which again probably would end up dropping below the 10. So I was surprised he didn't take the opportunity when it was on the table to take that contract.
Yes, it's a strange one as well, because I guess that, and he's probably not doing this to spite anyone or anything like that, but I suppose holding out like he is now is probably the only leverage he really has now as well, because he's got nothing else. As we've said, the rest of the running back market's kind of a bit diminished, and he's rejected an offer that is higher than everyone else is getting, and he knows he's not going to get that much. So I guess this is kind of like the last chance saloon for him to kind of hold back and go, hey, is there anything more we can do here? I mean, it would be interesting. So let's move on to something that's a bit more light-hearted and an odd piece of news to cover, but there is a reason. So the Giants' new additions have been announcing their jersey numbers, and we're going to quickly run through them. So Darren Waller's now got 12, Jeff Smith 19, Amani Oruwariye has got 20, Bobby McCain 21, Leonard Johnson 35, Bobby Okereke has taken 58 from our friend Casey Kreiter, who's switching to 59. I don't think Graham Gano was very happy about that in the slightest. Jamison Crowder's 80, Tommy Sweeney is 89, Raheem Nunez-Rochez is 93, and then there is a new number 0 in Paris Campbell. The introduction of number 0, which we all know is in college, has been very sort of divisive on Twitter. So I just want to know, do you like the number 0? And are there any other of the numbers there that you're just not a fan of? Because I know, I can't remember if it was Kev or Shane, but not happy with some of the linebacker numbers.
I want to hear Kev go on this one first.
To be honest, right, for most of them, they're good old-fashioned numbers. I mean, the tight end wearing number 12. You know what I mean? Like, that just looks awful. A tight end has to be an 88 89 number. Like, you know, that's what you want to see. You want to see the big number on the back at the end of the line. You don't only see a little 12 number at the end of a line there in inline blocking formations. And 0 isn't a number. I mean, it's actually not a number. Like, there's 11 men on the field. You give them numbers. 0 isn't a number. I mean, when I broke my heart when Braden Lindsay wore it for Notre Dame last season. I was thinking, like, we are traditionalists, Notre Dame. We won't be wearing number 0. It's been in for a couple of years in college. But we went and got it last year, and I wasn't happy then, and I'm not happy now. I mean, I'm a Boston Celtics fan as well, and I've got a few Jason Tatum jerseys, and it pains me to see that 0 on them. And I don't know, I could go on all night about it, but yeah, I'm not too happy with that.
And I'm not going to get as agitated as Kevin is, but I'm 45. I'm 45. I watch NFL. Look, I'm with Kevin on this. Like,
so Steve, by the look of things,
just doesn't make any bloody sense. Like 0 is not a number, right? So Paris Campbell jumping on 0. Like, anyway, look, there's other players in the league jumping on 0. It's ridiculous. Look, in my opinion. But to be honest, I'm more I'm more annoyed with the league. A couple of years back, I think we're 2 years removed from when they allow players to switch numbers, because again, for people who watch NFL for a long time, you kind of get this switched into your head around quarterbacks are essentially in a category of what say 1 to 19, and then you've got your running backs 20 to whatever 39. You know how it runs, and then you've got tight ends and then wide receivers. And I imagine for players in particular, I think Tom Brady came out at the time, and he said he was opposed to it, and people were kind of going, "Oh, Brady's giving out again." But Brady was saying, in a strange way, as a quarterback, you see a guy coming at you. You know who has the green dot, and you can obviously base it on the numbers as well. And you know if you see a safety coming in or a linebacker on a fake blitz, you see the number, you recognise what position he is on the field. But nowadays, it's far from it, because we've got Paris Campbell wearing 0. Is there anybody defensively? I haven't seen anybody so far in the league. I'm sure there's someone. There's bound to be a defensive player plugging for 0. It's just.
I think there is one. I can't remember who it is, but there is one.
There has to be, like seeing BBs and cornerbacks to single digits as well. Like seeing like number 5 or 2 on cornerbacks. It's just wrong. Do you know what I mean? I'm so glad Bobby Okereke went with 58, because his college number is 20, and there's a few graphics out there with him with 20 on. And after Julian Love left to go to the Seahawks, I thought he might take his number 20, but he stayed with a good linebacker number. So fair play to you, Bobby.
It just. Look, everybody's dealing with it. So, we're obviously discussing it now because it's one of our players has plugged for 0 and got it, and he happens to be one of the new players. I think we'll get over it if Paris Campbell is scoring game-winning touchdowns late in the game. In particular, if he used to do that in Dallas or Philadelphia in the season, and then he's wearing a 0. I think we might all rock up wearing a 0 the following week, but. But look, it's strange. Like, the gas thing is the younger generation who watch the NFL don't seem to care or bother by it. We, on the other hand, are disgusted by it. So.
I could a couple of years ago, I could just get over edge players wearing 50s, right? Because they were technically outside linebackers, right? I could just about give that up, because I believe the front has to be 90 across the board. But hey, again, maybe I'm a bit old school and stuff like that.
Are you basically saying we're old? Is that what we're saying? We don't like it because we're old.
There's a part of that. And he's definitely not buying a Paris Campbell 0 jersey, just by the sounds of it.
Well, as long as he gets more touchdowns than his number, and doesn't get close to the Kenny Golladay 1, then I think we'll all be very happy.
He doesn't have a lot of pressure on him, really, does he? If he wants to have a good opening season and match the Kenny Golladay record, he probably just needs to pick up a touchdown in his opening game. But look, in fairness to Paris Campbell, I know we're kind of getting off the beaten tracks. Like in fairness, we saw what he did. Like, for outside of watching the Giants games, obviously most NFL fans are watching Red Zone, and the Colts had a difficult season, but he was one of the bright spots. And even in the game in which he played, I think everybody's recognised that catch in which he had early in the game from Nick Foles was for him to go up with two secondary players in between him and pull that ball down. And he's electric, and he's yards after the catch. He's the type of player. It makes sense as to why Richie James wasn't held on. He was productive. He had a great season, but you're always looking for a little bit of an upgrade. And Paris Campbell certainly is that if they put him in a slot position. So I was delighted to see him picked up. I always felt we needed to. I don't think we've got that marquee wide receiver yet, but I certainly think if we were to go into the season the way we are, I think people would be pleasantly surprised with what we get out of him next season. Yeah,
and just to add to that as well, we talked about the signing, how much we liked the signing when it was made. He was one of the players I mentioned that we should kind of go after. If he could just stay healthy, he has that ability. Now, I would love to see that 0 get it extended at the end of the year because of his production on the field. So if he goes out and balls out, and if he gets like anywhere close to 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, I might even buy that 0 jersey myself.
You heard it here first. Kev putting sandwiches on the number 0 jersey has got to be something I did not have for this week. So, right. So we'll fire through the mock draft tracker because obviously we've been doing that every single week, and then we get on to asking Brian some more questions. So only one update this week as we edge ever closer to the draft. Mel Kiper seems to have decided that after not doing one for a few weeks, he's now done 2 in 2. But after he previously had gone Jordan Addison, then Quentin Johnson and Jordan Addison, all three wide receivers. He's now sort of flipped and gone with cornerback DJ Turner out of Michigan. He also did it was a 2-rounder, so second round he went with John Michael Smith, the center from Minnesota. But I was looking through the cornerback rankings that we had Kev and Shane do in. Actually, they're coming up, aren't they? So it's a little bit of a spoiler, actually, this. However, bear with me. So he switched from wide receiver to cornerback. Neither of you have Turner in your top 5s. That was one thing that I noticed from this pick. So in his mock, Gonzalez, Witherspoon, Porter Jr., Banks, Forbes already off the board. Is this a reach, or is Kuiper potentially higher on Turner than you guys are?
I think he's definitely higher on me. For me, just give it away. He comes in 11 on my cornerback rankings at the moment. I think Dane Brugler just released his beast as well this week, and he has him at 7. So not too far off, I suppose. I mean, he's a little bit smaller side. He's 5'11", 178 pounds. The thing is, he ran a 4.26 as a 40 at the combine, and I think that's propelling him forward more so in a lot of people's eyes. He's definitely like a feisty man corner. He's played outside, played a little bit of nickel as well, but he is an outside corner, and he shows a bit of fight to this. Can give away penalties and stuff, and get lost looking in the backfield a little bit. But he has potential. But I do believe that 40 time kind of has propelled him up draft boards a little bit.
I was surprised to see him there, Craig, for the reasons that when you're reading up on him, and it sounds like Kevin's done a lot more work than I have on him, but I haven't delved into him. Kevin said potential, okay? Potential. I read other ones saying not an immediate starter. I've seen a number of people say day 2 selection as opposed to a first round selection. And also people say coaching up type of player. I don't think where we are position wise in a cornerback, if we are going to jump up at the first round and go for cornerback, I don't think we're in a position that we can afford a player to come in at cornerback that is coaching up. And I know we've got great coaches, don't get me wrong. We saw from theirs last year, like our draft selections last year, by and large, nearly everybody produced, with the exception of obviously some players got injuries. So I get that. And like we've seen it before, players in the 3rd or 4th round can end up being more productive in the season as opposed to the 1st round, 2nd round, for whatever reason. Like you could argue that Bellinger had a better season than Evan Neal, but you have to take it on the merits. Evan Neal's playing right tackle, Bellinger's a starting tight end, but you can reflect on the season and go, he was the better player. But it's all relevant to where they play in the team. For us, trying to get a cornerback, I would be surprised if it was Turner, because I just don't think he's an immediate starter in day 1, and we need that.
Yeah, especially in round 1, it's a bit rich, isn't it, for round 1? I think if you were to look at it maybe as a later round, if one of the wide receivers dropped to us and we could pick him up and say as you said, that maybe a late day 2 or maybe even a day 3, I think it's a fairer reflection on the potential, because a lot of these players, obviously, you're going to look at floor and ceiling, and when you're looking at the higher draft picks, you're looking at a higher floor. Whereas with the lower draft pick, you're happier to have a bit more of a disparity between the floor and ceiling.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say, Kevin, you look at a cornerback in the 2nd round, and I suppose you look at the comparables against, we'll say Turner for argument's sake, and how much is the drop off? Because if a drop off isn't significant, like you've got Witherspoon, Gonzalez at the high end, and after that there really is a drop off. And I know there's other players further down, like Porter Jr. and stuff, but it seems to be those two, and then it drops off. Are we in a situation where we've got you said top 5 cornerbacks, and then the drop off is considered to the next way? Well, then maybe you do roll the dice and go that way. But if you feel that's someone in the 2nd round that you believe will be there come 25 again, that can be just as productive and can be coached up just as quickly as Turner, I'd be shying away from him. But again, we'll see what happens. I'd be surprised. I'd be very surprised if that was the case.
And just to add that as well, like we've only got a Dory Jackson signed for 1 more year, and like after that we haven't really got, at the moment, starting caliber cornerbacks. So for me, cornerback this year has to be a kind of safe pick, and then maybe next year, if we don't sign a Dory, you might sign someone. You might try and get someone who has a bit of upside and a little bit more of a gamble. The way I kind of look at these kind of things when I'm looking at players is like, because I played a little bit of Madden, I look at what is this player now and what could he be? Now, if a player is like a 75 overall, but could be a 90, but might not, I'd rather take someone who's an 80, could be an 85 player. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like you go for a little bit of the safer option, but might not be the excellent player down the road.
Yeah, it's the sort of tighter window rather than looking at something that's a bit broader.
You look at like Flott last year. Was he third round pick? Cornerback, and he was, I think he was third round, maybe fourth. And at the start when he was selected, people said, it's a work in progress type of player, but he will come on leaps and bounds once, after a period of time. He was in, I think, the second last play of the game against the Vikings in the wildcard game. On the third down, he was the one that broke up that play. So you've gone from a player that's picked in the lower rounds, coached up, put in a position, had obviously a lot to learn, had difficult parts of the season when he played, but then come the playoffs, he's making marquee plays in significant times in the game, as opposed to just, a down in the second quarter, third quarter, which isn't significant. You're hitting the real plays come the last drive of the game, and he's in there and he's making those plays. So there is other players there, and I'm sure people would reverse and say, okay, don't take a wide receiver in the first round. You'll get just as an explosive one in the second and third. I'm not entirely sure that's the case. And again, from where we are, we need to be taking a wide receiver that can hit the ground running, pardon the pun, and be, a number one star from day one. I'm not sure Turner is that guy. I think Forbes would be, but again, is he going to be there at that stage of the draft? Probably unlikely.
Yeah, he's been moving up boards, hasn't he, Forbes? He's been moving up boards quite a lot. So, right, so that's the end of mock session. So, right, with Brian on the show once again, and this being the first time that we've been able to kind of have a proper conversation with him since we had a few drinks in Wapping the night before the Packers game, we thought we'd get some opinions on a few big talking points last season. So let's start with actually last season itself. So expectations at the beginning of the season probably low, but what did you expect going in, and how much did the team exceed those expectations?
We, as the Irish NFL show, did a live show in June of last year at one of our sponsors' headquarters, and I laid out a scenario with the guys where I saw the Giants could win 7 games, and they didn't laugh at me, but they kind of just were shocked that I was suggesting that. And I said, I looked at the schedule and I said the Panthers is winnable, the Bears is winnable. I said the Titans in week 1 is a winnable game because the Titans just have a knack of finding ways to lose games, and lo and behold, they miss a field goal. So it kind of played out that way. I felt the Lions game was winnable. Okay, we didn't probably foresee the season in which the Lions had, but there was very winnable games too. And I actually said it could be a difficult conversation, a difficult scenario for the Giants if they were to win 7 games, because where would that leave us in the Daniel Jones? Because if we were to win 7 games, and I know there was games we won late on last season that could have went either way, and we may have only won those 7 games, but I still think now we've signed Daniel Jones to a long-term contract. But at that stage, I said if we were to win 6 or 7 games, that would make things even more difficult for the Giants, because we wouldn't be in a position to select Wayne the quarterbacks early on in the draft this year, because we'd probably be picking around the 12 to 14 marker. Thankfully, we're picking 25 because we've had a great season. So I did expect us to win more games than people had given us credit for. Like people were saying, suggesting 3-win season, 4-win season. I said 7 was the mark for me. But as the season went on, I think after strange enough, I thought the Ravens win was more important than the Packers win. I know it was great to go to London and for us to be there and experience that was fantastic, to come back from 14 points down. But it was more the following week to actually go and then beat a Ravens team that were at that stage on a roll. They'd won some really good games. And the win in the manner in which they did in terms of coming back from 10 points down with 10 minutes to go in the game. And then I thought that was a significant win, because at that stage we went 5-1, and then all of a sudden you're looking at other teams in the league in terms of what their schedule was, and you're saying it really is, realistically, the Giants probably only needed 3 more wins. They got the 4 wins, but they really realistically probably only needed 3 more wins to be a wildcard team. So I think for all of us, like, pleasantly surprised at how the season started, but then you got to a stage when, oh, this is serious now, we actually could go to the playoffs. But I think as you reflect on the season, I think winning a playoff game was fantastic for where we've been over the past couple of years. To win a playoff game was fantastic. I think everybody recognised when we went up against the Eagles that it was a complete mismatch, and I think we were all going to buy it by the fact that we won. the Vikings game and we gave ourselves a chance. But I think by the end of the fourth quarter in that game, I think we saw the disparity and the gap between what we have available to us as opposed to what they had. So expected a 7-win season. Obviously very pleased that we made the playoffs and in a much better position going forward now under the coaching staff that we have.
So looking at the actual players then from last season, 3 players from you is what I want. Most valuable Giant, so that's the one person who you take them out of the team and we are much worse off. And then your offensive and defensive players of the year.
Oh God, it's a tough one. It's too obvious to say Saquon, isn't it? But it is. It's the reality of the situation. Without Saquon. Because you just see how the teams have to kind of combat against playing against him, and we have to credit the offensive line. They were much better last year. The gaps were there for Saquon to get through, but for him to come back and have the season in which he did, and if we had lost him for any long period of time, like we saw his snap count go down dramatically in the Lions game, in which we lost at home, and the adverse impact that had on an offense, which, let's be fair, didn't really have any marquee wide receivers to look for, was significant. So take him out of the team, which is why this thing, if it rumbles into training camp, will be a concern if he's not willing to play under this tag. But take him out of the game, take out of the team. It's an obvious one. Defensive player, people would probably think Kev or Leonard Williams, but it has to be Dexter Lawrence, doesn't it? Like the man who I was fortunate to be at the press conference after the Packers game. The man who said he went to the chip shop on Friday, ate two chips, 2 burgers, and was still hungry after. And he was hungry for every game last season to get to the quarterback. So, look, there's been a lot of scrutiny over him, in terms of the pick. He was tagged to the Odell Beckham pick because obviously he was the one in which the 15th pick, and he's gradually turned into the player in which we all hope he would be. But you can see the kind of the love affair that the coaches have. Obviously, we've all watched the Giants live video, and they're calling him up from the combine, and and straight away the first thing he says is, what players are you watching, what Clemson players are out there. So he's tuned in, switched on to what's expected of him, and he wants the team to only get better. So for me, he was the best player defensively. What was the other one? MVP of the offense, is it?
Just MVP overall.
Oh God!
Take the player out, and we are significantly worse. Andrew
Thomas, and that might surprise people, but like he's gone from a scenario where people were mocking him. There was the four offensive line guys picked in the draft, and all those mock drafts, leading up to that one, it was like a swap around. If you got any of the 4, you'd be happy. Maybe Mekhi Becton, because he looked like the best one initially at the start, and the way things have played out for him haven't been great. And Andrew Thomas had a difficult enough first year, which is why when people slate Evan Neal, I just kind of reflect on Andrew Thomas and say, let's not be so judgmental. Let's see how things play out, because after a year of it, people were giving up on Andrew Thomas, but now when he gets paid, he's going to get paid really, really well. And like I said, the offensive line played really well last year, but he's stand out. And he does his job so well that he doesn't get talked about in large parts, but he's just so good now. It's like it's a given. And so for me, you take him out of the team on Daniel Jones' blind side, that makes things very difficult. So for standout player.
Cool. Then the last one from me, looking at the last season thoughts. So if you could change one thing about last season, what would it be and why?
I'm not sure. Have you asked this question of the guys, of everybody yet? Or is it just me? Because I've got an answer. I want to see, are you surprised by it? I wouldn't... Go on, sorry.
We asked Casey. Casey replied with his snap in the first game. We asked Ruben, and I can't remember. I think Ruben might have said about Adoree Jackson.
Killed it. That's...
It's the one, isn't it?
Don't put Adoree Jackson back for punt returns. Or if you do, put him back and just say, call a fair catch. No, because he was such an impactful player last year, and Kev's right, he called it. He's only got 1 year left on his contract. But at this stage last offseason, people are suggesting he was a potential casualty under the new coaching staff. Would he make the cut come the end of August when they had to scale it down to the 53? But he was a standout player last season. So for him to be put back in a position to be returning punts when we just discussed the fact that we don't really have an abundance of cornerbacks. It was ludicrous. And it was more like that 4-week window when he was gone. Like, you saw the difference. And it wasn't so much about the talent. It was more around he seems to be able to get other players to align with what his way of thinking is in the secondary. They work together in unison. That was completely gone. The Eagles game was a farce at home. I mean, that was, unfortunately, that was like turn off Teddy type scenario come the third quarter, because they were just getting, like, it was 21-0 before you could even blink. And two of those touchdowns were deep throws from Hurts into the secondary. And you got Julian Love coming across. So that's probably is the obvious one. Would I change anything else? Because that answer's in. Jeez, it's difficult. Just trying to think of an alternative, because he's taking that.
It's such a big moment, though, isn't it? I mean, like, it's one that just jumps to mind straight away.
Would I change it? Yeah, I've got one for you. And it's more of a play that didn't go right for us. If Saquon holds on to the ball in the Thanksgiving game on that 4th down and 4th and 1 pass on the screen, on the fake handoff, he's got like 40, 50 yards ahead of him and nobody's there. And I think we take the lead in that game. And we played so well in that game, to lose by 8 points was a bit unfair on them. I know there was a garbage time touchdown, but for the team that went into that game missing 8 or 9 players that played so well in that game, and there was just key plays in that game that if they had went our way, or had been the production had been right, we potentially could have walked out of that game, because it seems like it's a long time since we've won. As great as the season was, it would be even better if we won in Dallas or won in Philadelphia. I think that's something that we'll look to address next season, to have that feeling of going into a divisional rival. I know we beat the Commanders, but they're not at the same kind of magnitude as beating the Eagles or beating the Cowboys. So that's probably the play maybe that I wish we could have back. That a fair one? Would you go with that one?
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's fair on me.
Yeah.
Right up there for me as well. Right, so Brian, with plenty of re-signings, new signings, and players leaving this offseason, who do you think's been the biggest addition, the biggest risk, and the biggest loss we've had this offseason?
The biggest risk is Waller, strangely enough. And the reason I say that is production level. You know, when he produces on the field, he's a standout player. You know, we saw what, you know, he's been paid well by the Raiders. We saw what he did. But he also, if you look at the amount of games in which he's missed, that's a concern. And he had hamstring injury concerns last year. And I saw Shane's interview where he said, if you look at the working which our staff did in the medical room, you know, our injury rate is way down on the previous management team. So they've obviously brought in the right peoples, but hamstrings are hamstrings, and it doesn't matter how much of a medical staff you have. If your hamstring goes, your hamstring goes. So if he's 100% and he's on the field, he's going to be a serious weapon, I imagine, for this offense. And it's not so much about him getting the ball; it's more about teams having to cater for him being on the field, down in the middle, and that will allow up, you know, other opportunities for other players. I touched on it earlier. I'm really excited. The signing for me is Paris Campbell. I think he's severely underrated in this league. I think if he had been playing in a Colts offense last year, that was a lot more fruitful. Like, they had a difficult season, let's be fair. But yeah, he was a bright spot in a difficult season. If he's playing in an offense that's really going well, I'd imagine he could be really a standout player. And I think, as well as Richie James has played last year, I think we could see another level of wide receiver play from Paris Campbell. What's the last one? The biggest? I've given you the risk. I've given you the player. What's the final one?
The biggest loss, the player that's left us.
I'd go back to Feliciano. It's probably, people are going to say, seriously, like, he's, you know, for what he was brought in last year. But it was more around what he brought in, because he understood what was expected. He understood what Dable wanted. He kind of played in games where, you know, people didn't have any expectations for him. And that, for me, I'd say the biggest concern right now is the offensive line. Because as well as it played last year, we right now have gaping holes. And I know that can be answered by what we discussed tonight with, you know, players coming in who've had reasonably good careers in the league, but like outside of, and Glowinski, like, for large parts of his season, he struggled a bit as well. So you've got your left tackle, you've got your right tackle, but in between all that, I'm a little bit nervous about that side of things.
Still question marks, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, but you have to have trust the process, and I think what we've learned over the past year is that no matter what happens, I think every Giants fan will give the benefit of the doubt to Shane and Dable, because they just seem to be tied to the hip in terms of what decisions they make. So I'm sure they have plans in place of how they're going to address it. But right now, it is because it goes like no, I don't think anybody was not disappointed in the right word. It's like Gates went, and look, everybody wishes him well, and it is what it is. But he goes, and then you've got players that are not always 100% fit, which we discussed earlier in the show, and Shane Lemieux, and then you've got Bredesen moving over. So right now we don't really have any. Like I remember last year, if you remember Joe Shane's press conference at the Combine, he said, I think we've only got 5 offensive line guys. But as I feel like that's still the case. It doesn't feel like we have an abundance of players. We do in other positions, but there we don't. So for me, that's the risk to not try keep hold of these guys that have, whilst they're on the wrong side of their career, they're still been very productive over the course of the 4 seasons. So that for me is the biggest risk at the moment.
So just speaking of Joe Shane, right, with every move that he's made this since he's been in the front office, they've all been an element of low risk, high reward. How nice is it to have a front office that's making smart decisions rather than just throwing cash around and pushing money into the future, risking our future cap?
Well, it just seems to be a lot more thought around what they're going to do. Like nothing is made. Like Odell Beckham to me is a classic example of the situation. How many Giants fans wanted him back? Was that more kind of, we thought we get a player out, and we thought he still has a good play in him. Obviously, the Ravens have taken a chance. But then I think when you take a step back and you look at what Shane and Dale are doing, would have been the most fruitful of signings? Is it something that you could look at and say, that's going to benefit us in 2 to 3 years? I don't believe that would be the case. And every decision now seems to be made with a kind of a long-term view as to what to do. Even the players that are brought in for 1 year, like again, like we're talking about players walking away, but what they've done in that year for other players within the organisation that are young players to understand what's expected of them and learn from those players has been marquee. And every player that's been brought in, like I can't honestly think of a player that was signed to cause an issue. Like Jahid Ward comes in, he's a feisty kind of guy. He has, you look at his history and his background in terms of his personal life and what he's had to deal with, with his brother passing away. But he's galvanised players, and these players come in and they want to play with him, and they're all, as you said, high reward players, and it's great to see those. He's been rewarded with another year there. So it's hard to think of any player that was brought in who really didn't really contribute in a way. But obviously expectations change, like we've seen. We went into this free agency and we had a little bit more money about us, and we could go in and try and make, signs. The Waller trade, obviously it was a trade as opposed to a free agency signing, but it's still a marquee signing. We all expected a big signing in free agency. So, and then obviously Okereke coming in, like linebacker was an obvious need. We need to find a way to stop the run, and maybe he seems like the kind of player that can really contribute to that. So there's no one that's come in that you really say that's a really risky move. All of them seem to have a balanced look about it. And I like the draft for now is really, it'd be interesting how this draft goes out, because you look at last year's draft, and even walking out last year's draft, the expectation was these guys would contribute, but they all contribute so quickly. So, you see some guys have a really first strong draft as a GM. The second year isn't as good as the first, so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in 2 weeks' time. I just want to say one more thing on Gettleman, because ironically enough, the 5 players in which we're looking to lock down are off Gettleman drafts. Saquon, Daniel Jones, Andrew Thomas. There's 2 more I'm thinking of.
Sexy Dexy, and
McKinney. They're all players that they've inherited, and 9 times out of 10 the GM comes in and the coach comes in. The guys who they've inherited don't tend to last too long. So for them to be there and be productive as they are, and obviously being rewarded with the Giants, because it looks like they're all a given to be re-signed. Gettleman did do some good things, a lot of bad things in terms of contracts being handed out, but he did have scouts that were, but the problem was it was the lower rounds that didn't work out. The high ends were good, but the lower rounds just seemed to, like, you look at the return on low end picks, they're all gone. But those players, it's just strange that you don't see that very often, that 5 players that have been inherited are all going to get new contracts.
Let's speak about one of those contracts. Daniel Jones it dominated, didn't it? It just dominated all the way up until the 4 minutes before the franchise tag deadline that it went up to. So what do you think about the contract now that we now have like the nuances and we've been able to really digest it? And how do you think both sides feel after those negotiations?
I think that it was a strange one because initially when the season ended, first of all, Joe Shane was quite adamant on the Monday after the Eagles lost that if Daniel Jones is coming back, he's our quarterback. Then you saw the move where he changed agents, and there was obviously speculation as to why he was doing that, whether it was a case he didn't feel he was getting the right offer because of his agent weren't, he changed his agency, and all of a sudden the word on the street is he wants 40 million. And I imagine like every Giants fan, including ourselves, we all went 40 million. I would have thought it was 30 to 35 million, scenario. And then all of a sudden it was up to 45 million. And then you're kind of down. Then you always kind of go, it's mad. It's like they set the seed, 35 million is what your expectation is. Then 40 goes out, you're thinking that's too high. Then a week prior to the tag, it's up to 45. And then you're kind of going, okay, let's hit a 40. But that's the nature of the negotiation. I think the Giants, and I mean this in a positive way, the Giants kind of brought this on themselves in a way because they didn't want to take up the 5th-year option last year. And at the time, I don't think anybody would have argued that they should have, because I think even at that stage to pay him 22 million, bearing in mind where they were in the cap situation. I mean, James Bradbury was let go last year, was one of our best players, but cap situation meant they had to let him go. But then at the end of last season, people were saying, I bet the Giants wish they took that 5th-year option now because it was 24 million, and that would have been the benchmark for the contract. I think both parties are married to one another in a way, like you saw after that Colts game in particular, when at Christmas when they made the playoffs, and the kind of relationship and the look at each other's, the responses from both David and Jones as he came off, that they both really are kind of joined to the hip essentially now, that they want to work together. And I think Jones has recognised it was his opportunity. But like Jones's guys are clever because the cap is going up every year, and we're going to be in a situation where 2 or 3 years time another quarterback's going to be out there and he's going to be looking for 50 million and 55 million. And then we're going to be, if things continue to trend in an upward curve and Jones continues to have good season, we'll be saying that 40 million isn't so bad now, is it? So it's just, it's where we're at. It's a bit like the Saquon thing. You're stepping back. Saquon probably feels he should have taken that 12 and a half at the time now, as opposed to looking at it. The Giants probably reflecting, saying, I wish we haven't had taken that 5th-year option, but with a new GM and head coach, you're never going to take. I think it's a win-win for all of us. Like, ultimately, it was more important the contract was done. If he went on the tag at 32 million, yeah, it's a cheaper rate, but 32 million consumed all on that cap. We wouldn't have been in a position to do anything in free agency. So it was important that the deal got done. I think by the time it hit, 8:59 our time that night, I think we were just saying, just sign the deal and let's just get on with it. But
I was kind of sitting up like it was like a cup final or something. You're waiting for the 90th minute winner to come in. Like, it kind of felt like that.
The refresh button going at 90. Yeah.
Well, I think me and Shane were both at football games, and we said it was bitterly cold, and we both had like numb hands from just constantly like refreshing. And the second there's a football game in front of us, and neither of us are watching it, just kind of watching the phone. So,
and of course, it allowed us to tag Berkeley as well.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah, it was a double whammy. So we knew that was the case. Like, it was inevitable. If you tag Berkeley, if you tag Jones, Barkley was walking into free agency. He may have returned because he didn't get the offer, but I think someone out there would have, if he was a free agent, I think someone out there would have pushed to 12 million, because they probably would have taken the opportunity to think that he would give them the production that he got, that the Giants got from him last year. I think he would have got paid in free agency. But it was so important, because one signifies the other, in the sense like you've now got your starting quarterback and your starting running back. So that's crucial to the team.
So looking ahead, the Giants still have problematic areas to address. We've covered a few of them. Where do you think the focus is going to be in those early rounds? And is there anyone that you've kind of got your eye on? Because we all have our favourites, and we all have those players where we go, oh, I'd really love it if the Giants drafted them. So have you got a couple of them? I
would be stunned if we don't go wide receiver in the first round. It's probably very obvious to say that now, but like, isn't like how many wide receivers that they brought in today for? I don't know. It's like it's part of the education of a draft that they're going to bring in everybody and anybody to. But they had like in the region of 12 wide receivers in today, and there's a few second rounders in as well. So like it's not just all geared. Like the cornerback thing is a good storyline in itself that we have to address that. But I think we can find us a cornerback somewhere before the season starts. I was surprised yesterday with the Jeff Okudah trade that we'd like for the fact he's gone for a fifth, that the Giants didn't consider that. I mean, he's been productive enough. I know he's had his difficult times, but he had a number of interceptions last year that like he delivered it to a certain extent for Lions games last year. For him to go in for the fifth, I thought that was surprising. I saw a number of Giants beat writers even suggesting that today. I think we can find another cornerback if it's not a trade, a pick up during the summer that can potentially come in and help the situation. I think it's a wide receiver in the first round. Who do I want? Zay Flowers is probably the one that I like the look of because I think he could have fit into what we want to do. Who do I think we're going to pick? I think we're going to, if he's still there, I think he'll be Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee. That's one that is an intriguing one because he can take the top off of defense. If you look at I know it's college and I know it's at times it can be hard to come into the NFL and do that initially. And we have seen players do it immediately, like Jamar Chase and other players come in and hit the ground running. He looks like the kind of player that we need that can take the top off of defense, as opposed to other players. But Zay Flowers, I think, if he's still there at 25, I think I'd be surprised if he gets past the Ravens at 22. I think the Ravens are going to try everything in their power to give another receiver to Lamar.
Even with Odell?
Even with Odell, I think. But I just have a feeling Zay Flowers, for some reason, is again another player that kind of suits what they want. So if he's there at 25, I think he's the one. But I have a feeling it'll be Jalen Hyde. I don't know why, but that's me go.
Right. I'm going to
Grey
pass
on wide
back.
receivers? Grey on wide receivers? Are you still think it's going to be a cornerback?
I think wide receiver.
I think wide receiver.
Yeah.
I think it's still like the better value. I think the cornerback's a little bit more deeper as you get to the second and third. And I think cornerback as well, you're able to pick up someone in the second and third a little bit more better suited to wing scheme. They're a little more scheme dependent cornerback. So it's more like, what flavor ice cream do you like, so to speak? I know you can do that with wide receivers as well. But I think cornerbacks, we might see someone selected higher than general consensus, but will fit wing scheme better.
I would also say, Craig, you look at most mock drafts now, there's around 3 or 4 wide receivers all kind of landing in that 22 to 32 slot. So usually when you see that with most mock drafts and it comes to kind of play out that way, that it's a case of, are you comfortable with all 4? Yes. Okay. Well then, what's your pecking order, and then which one is there at 25, and that's the one we go. But unless they deviate away from that, which is why I think Jalen Hyde might be slightly the deviation away from that, because he's such an aerial threat, and they need to get someone who can do that. We haven't had a player like that in such a long time that can really take the top off of defense.
So I think that's probably it for Giants questions. So Kev's going to go for something that's a bit more upbeat and more suited to you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about obviously with you guys doing the podcast and it being such a success, you've had some really good experience, really cool experiences. And I just wanted to say you had a really busy weekend whilst the Giants were over in London. From doing the live show, you met up with us in Wapping, and actually doing the game itself. We just got a couple of highlights from that weekend.
From that weekend, I would start with the event in which you put together, because genuinely, you put such a great event together. And I was delighted to be there. And I was delighted to be there as a fan and to be there with you guys, because you used to do a lot of great work in terms of, it's the content you were putting out on the Giants. But there was the nature of how many people were there, all the different environments that people come to. It wasn't just UK based. There was guys from the States there. There was guys from Ireland there. There was guys from mainland Europe there. It was a combination of different Giants fans. You should take a lot of credit for that. You should put that together. On a weekend where, let's be fair, there was a significant amount of more Packers fans in London over the course of the weekend. So it was doubly difficult even one to get a venue, but to put an event together. So that was really enjoyable. The best moment of that weekend for me was to be at Brian Dable's press conference after the win. just to sit there, to have the opportunity to ask Dable a question about Darius Slayton's performance in that game, because he had a difficult. If you remember at the start of the season, he wasn't getting a lot of snaps, and Dable had suggested if you prove yourself during the week and in practice, you'll get your opportunity. And that to me was probably the game in which signified that he was a part of the plans, and obviously he's been rewarded with the contract at the end of the season. That was the first game last season that we really saw Slayton come out and prove himself. And strangely enough, when you're in the media area, you're not supposed to celebrate. You're not supposed to show any bias towards either team. You're supposed to sit there and enjoy the game, but obviously report the game. And that's what I did for 3.5 quarters. And a part of that was the fact that the Packers were out in the lead for a large part, so there wasn't a lot to celebrate. But as the fourth quarter went on, and I had Richard Graves, who you probably know from me, he's done Sky Sports, and he does a lot of media stuff. He's a Cowboys fan. He was on a podcast with me last week, and he even joked about the fact that come the fourth quarter, I was sitting in the middle of the media area, jumping up and down and cheering like another spectator, as opposed to actually sitting there like media, which is so maybe they won't let me back in next year when I go to cover the Bills and the Titans games. But that was the best moment of the weekend. The Dable press conference was the best though. To be able to, it's different because as a supporter in the ground, when you go to a match, you have your beers. Like that's not part of what we do on the day of the game. So you just go out afterwards and enjoy yourself. We go into the media areas to have that opportunity to go in there and sit there and listen to Dable firsthand, listen to Jones, Barkley, Sexy Dexy, Julian, and everybody coming out after a win like that was fantastic. It was one of the best moments of the season.
Oh, fantastic. You were at the Super Bowl again this year. You mentioned it before that you got to meet some Giants legends at the media day. How was that, meeting them, and how was the weekend in general?
Arizona for me was much more enjoyable than last year's Super Bowl in LA. LA was fantastic, don't get me wrong. I know we spoke about last year's show, how enjoyable it was to be at my first Super Bowl. Cover that with the guys. Be in LA, go to all the different various media events. But to be at the Super Bowl this year was like, it's back in the sense of the world is back to normal, and there was no COVID thought process whatsoever. And I thought the first year in LA was huge, but like, someone asked me, and I could have said it on our own show, the morning of, we did our live show at the stadium on the Saturday morning leading up to the Super Bowl, how to explain Radio Row. It's like going to Cheltenham. And essentially you're at Cheltenham, except all you're at is a room, a conference room full of everybody talking about NFL and giving their opinions on the Super Bowl and all the different podcasts around the room. It's strange to explain, but it's a unique and enjoyable occasion. You get to meet so many different people. Pat McAfee, met him. You're meeting all the NFL Network guys that you've actually had on the show, and it's nice. You get a nice feeling that they recognise who you are, and they recognise that you're from the show, and you've travelled all the way from Ireland to Arizona to be there essentially for the week and to meet Carl Banks. And the guest, as I said earlier on before we started recording, Carl Banks immediately called you guys out. So I had to.
I'll take that.
I had to tell him that I was on your show. But he was a gentleman. He gave up time to have a chat about the Giants, get a few photographs, and a number of other people like Michael Lombardi does a great podcast, former GM in the league. To meet him in person, have a chat with him, it was fantastic. And then to be at the game itself on the Sunday, like you look back at the last maybe 7 or 8 Super Bowls, struggle to think of a Super Bowl that was as good and as jokingly as much as we dislike the Eagles because they're a divisional rival. Like they were very unfortunate not to win the Super Bowl, and Jalen Hurts is very unfortunate not to be the MVP of a Super Bowl in which he runs in 3 touchdowns, throws a fantastic touchdown to AJ Brown. But yeah, he loses out to probably arguably the best quarterback in the game in Patrick Mahomes, and Andy Reid finds a way to win another Super Bowl. But to be at the game and experience every facet of that game was fantastic from start to end. Whoever won would have been a fitting winner, but they come out on top of the late field goal. It was a fantastic Super Bowl to be at. But the whole week itself was great. Arizona put on a great show throughout the course of the week. Very enjoyable.
Brilliant. I mean, that's it. That's all we've got for you. But I mean, we've just cracked an hour now, and as always, whenever you're on the pod, we could go for hours and hours. This is why we need to go to a pub again at some point and have a proper chat. But
hopefully that is the case. Hopefully, obviously Kevin's coming out for the Notre Dame game. We make plans, and hopefully you are planning to take in one of the London games next season, and then we can all catch up and have a few drinks. The only thing I should have said, the only thing better than that Super Bowl would be if it was the Giants in the Super Bowl, and hopefully that will come in good time for us all. So, look, I love coming on with you guys. I love interacting and engaging and checking in with you throughout the course of the season, because ultimately all we want is to see the Giants win, and so I was delighted that we could find time to do this.
Absolutely. So, unfortunately, folks, that's all we have time for. And for me, it's my last live pod until after the draft. So fret not. Dan, Kev, and Shane will be back next week, same time. Another guest with them, replacing me this time, as they'll be chatting to one of the key cogs in the New York Giants fans UK machine, Andy Robertson. Anything to add before we go?
It'd be interesting to see what comes in the next week in terms of leading up to the draft, just because, 2 weeks out from the draft, we think we know who's going one. It looks like it's Bryce Young. Last week it was CJ Stroud for large parts of March. It looked like it was a locked-in thing. Will it twist again? And who's going to make that big trade? Because there's always someone who surprises us on the night. Maybe we'll make a big trade for a wide receiver. Who knows?
Kev?
Just
Brilliant to have you on, Brian. Love getting you on, talking Giants. You know your stuff. You happens in the league and stuff. And it's such different circumstances to previous years. So let's sort of like build for the future. And let's get you back on when we win a few more games this season.
Hopefully, we'll be back on before the season starts. Maybe after the draft, we can react on our first round pick. It'll probably be offensive line then. We'll all be completely wrong.
You mean when we trade out of the first round?
At 4 o'clock in the morning.
I look forward to hearing Shane's reaction to us now talking about taking offensive line, because that seems to be his worst nightmare. He's not an offensive line guy. But as always, remember just to like this video, subscribe on YouTube, hit the bell to be notified when we go live. If you aren't already, follow us on Twitter. We always do good stuff over there. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. Just search Big Blue UK and Ireland. We're all parts of the New York Giants Fans UK Facebook group, so you can also find us there. Our email goes across the bottom, the Full 10 Yards website where we do articles, which I've recently released my latest article looking at the off-season 5 things there. So check that out. My thanks, as ever, go to Kev and to Brian for joining. Thank you all for watching and for listening. We are signing off until next time.